Assalamu alaikum. Hi everyone. My name is Fatima and I'd like to welcome you all to today's talk and also to give a quick introduction for our speakers. The title of the talk is Legendary Muslim Women, and speaking on this important topic today are Dr. Abida and Sheikh Fulla. We have two excellent speakers today. The first person, like I said, is Dr. Abida Malik. Dr. Abida is our very own chaplain. She's a UON alumni who has had roles in FOSIS, ISOC, Bridge Institute think tank, and is currently lecturing in the School of Sociology and is a fellow at Parliament. Dr. Fulla is an alima and a sheikha. She has an ijaza on Sahih Bukhari and Muslim. She also has a BA in Quran and Sunnah Sciences from Islamic University in Algeria and a Master's in Islamic Studies from Loughborough and an MA in Education from the University of Nottingham, as well as a PhD which she completed in Education in 2012. She's also a qualified academic and senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Next up, I think, is the Quran recitation by Kim. Sorry.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ضرب الله مثلا للذين كفروا امرأة نوح وامرأة لوط كانتا تحت عبدين من عبادنا صالحين فخانتاهما فلم يغنيا عنهما من الله شيئا وقيل ادخلا النار مع الداخلين وضرب الله مثلا للذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون إذ قالت رب ابن لي عندك بيتا في الجنة ونجني من فرعون وعمله إذ قالت رب ابن لي عندك بيتا في الجنة ونجني من فرعون وعمله ونجني من القوم الظالمين ومريم ابنة عمران التي أحصنت فرجها فيه من روحنا وصدقت بكلمات ربها وكتبه ومريم ابنة عمران التي أحصنت فرجها فنفخنا فيه من روحنا وصدقت بكلمات ربها وكتبه وكانت من القانتين وصدقت بكلمات ربها وكتبه وكانت من القانتين صدق الله العظيم.
صدق الله العظيم. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثرهم إلى يوم الدين. In the name of Allah, and peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and upon all the prophets and messengers before him. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and it's my honor that you take some time out of your busy schedules with studies to come here and to meet each other, inshallah. So we are talking about the agency of Muslim women and the beautiful verses that the brother just now recited beautifully, just tackling this agency of Muslim women from the Quran. Because here talking about agency not in relation to men, agency not in relation to society, is agency within the worldview of the Muslim worldview, your relationship straight away between you as a woman and Allah, your creator, who does not discriminate between his servants, amongst his servants. So you see that relationship in those verses, that the examples that Allah has given to the believers, the two believers, these two women of examples, the wife of Fir'aun and the Maryam, the daughter of Imran, are two examples that are standing in the Quran, standing up there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, himself the Almighty, who has given to us these two examples to both men and women to learn from them in their agency. You see the wife of Fir'aun, she stood up against the power and authority of the state and of her husband. So if we're talking about a husband as a power authority in the family, or talking about Fir'aun as the authority in Egypt at the time, we found that woman who stood up to say no and to stand up for justice, to support the oppressed in society, to support the minorities of the Israelites in Egypt. And that woman had a voice, despite the arrogancy of Fir'aun. Another one is the example of Maryam and the spirituality, the agency of Maryam through her spirituality and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That there is no discrimination in Islam between men and women in their service, spiritual service. And you find here, while Fir'aun's wife, her agency through social justice on, in her society, supporting the oppressed and standing up for her own beliefs and values, we find Maryam alayhi salam also was standing up for her spirituality, even against the odds later on when she got Isa alayhi salam. So we find these two ladies giving us how these two examples are for men and women. So the framework that we would like to discuss agency here, we'd like to discuss agency from the Islamic framework, from within which there is the ontology or the philosophy of being. As beings, as Muslims, from an Islamic perspective, we have a relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly, and it can be heard directly from your Lord, and we find this in Surah Al-Mujadila. قد سمع الله قول التي تجادلك في زوجها وتشتكي إلى الله. Allah heard the complaint of the woman who came to complain to you about her husband, and Allah is all hearing, all seeing. You find in the verses. So you find here, these actually, I already got into something from the verses. I like kind of a conversation rather than a formal kind of a lecture, because I know that you have plenty of lectures in your studies. These are examples from the Quran. What about examples from the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? We found the great example of Khadija, his wife, and we find the great example of Zainab. Khadija, through love and care and support and standing up for her values, again in the Qurayshi society, oppressive Qurayshi society, when there was persecution, when there was economic oppression against the Prophet and his followers, when there was abuse to her husband, to the believers, to her, to Fatima when she was with her dad. So we find here a woman who combines between being a trade, a woman active in economy of her society, but also a woman who's confident, a woman who chose to believe in her husband before even he was not sure whether this is about prophecy or something wrong happened to him. But she highlighted some values. Those values, usually people, they focus that those values, they are for the Prophet, peace be upon him, as being truthful, as being somebody or noble, as being. But I looked through another side. I looked through the agency of Khadija radiallahu anha, how she was analyzing the personality of her husband, and she was identifying some key characters in his personality, that he was somebody who would honor his guests, somebody who would stand up for justice, somebody who's truthful. They don't speak about the Prophet as much as they speak for Khadija, that she could notice those and she could highlight them at a time when the Prophet ﷺ needed them most. So she was his strength at that moment. She was his support. Not as somebody submissive, as usually they highlight Muslim women, but somebody who had values. Based on those values, she proposed to her husband. She proposed to the man that met her, the values that she was for. Remember, Khadija is the one who asked the Prophet to work in her trade, and this is an agency and action. And she was the one also to send him if he's interested in marriage, because he met her standards, I would say. But regardless, there are many proposals in Quraysh to her as a noble lady, but this is her agency in selecting as well her family life, and based on what values her family life would be built. So when we find Khadija the merchant, when we find her seerah you find in the seerah of Ibn Hisham, a key source of seerah of the Prophet of Ibn Hisham, he described Khadija as resolute and noble lady. This is even before she got married to the Prophet. This is no wonder to see later on the strong bond of the Prophet with Khadija, and the love that was lasting till his death. Even when he visited Mecca, he went to visit Khadija. You see, it's not because of a love as a male and female, which is there, but it's a noble love that is even because of her agency, because of her character, because of her personality. We find Khadija provided, she supported her community, her wealth spent on her community for justice, for values, freeing the slaves or supporting the needy, till she died. Then you find another example. Zainab, the daughter of Khadija, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What do we expect of the children of these two parents who are both noble and who are both standing up for values? The Prophet, peace be upon him, stood up for justice before he became a prophet. He stood up for justice in a coalition against oppression in Quraysh. And that is Hilf al-Fudul. and in that coalition against to support the oppressed, regardless of their background, regardless of who they are, regardless of their economic status, regardless of their tribe, to support whoever is oppressed. And Khadija, remember, praised him for this quality that he is a prophet. And one of the characteristics is this, because he stood up for justice. So this is Zainab. Zainab's, I encourage you to go and read about the story of Zainab. Zainab's love story with her cousin and husband later, Abu As. We find Zainab, Abu As is the son of Khadija's sister. So, and at that time, he was noble. He was, in terms of, at that time, lineage is so important in Quraysh. But that was not the case why Zainab chose him. He was a man of character. And later on, the incidents and the conflict will show it's not about nobleness being rich. There are many rich people. There were many rich people in Quraysh. But because he was truthful, he was a man of principle, and Zainab as well. They got married. She was very happy. He loved her so much. She was that calm girl and a confident girl. But he was working in business, and he came from his business to find his wife accepting a new religion. And her father is a prophet. And she told him about that she became a Muslim, and that her father, who's his father-in-law, is a prophet. Now, he hesitated. He was silent. And then later on, she is, again, my father became a prophet, and I have become a Muslim. And he replied, why didn't you tell me first? Why, Zainab, this is my choice. Why should I tell you? This is my belief. So she was not waiting till her love doesn't mean that she is submissive to her husband, even though she loved him so much, as the proof later on. But her relationship is with Allah directly, is not with people to control her. So in this case, she said, I wasn't going to disbelieve in my father and his message, and she knows who is her father. He is not a liar. She is justifying her choice. So she was not a woman, I'm just following my father, I'm just following my dad. Because later on, she didn't go with her dad. She chose to stay in Mecca, and this shows her agency. So she's not following her husband in belief. She, based on reasons, chose to follow her dad, to believe in her dad as a prophet, but she chose to remain in Mecca, and her dad to migrate in Medina, another city, far away from Mecca, and the people of Quraysh in Mecca were fighting her dad, amongst them her husband. And he chose to go in the Battle of Badr, her dad fighting her husband fighting her dad, and her dad fighting her husband. There was a battle in there, and her husband was captive, was for the Muslims. And in that, she was happy that neither her dad nor her husband were killed. But then she was in a dilemma. Now she wants her husband back to Mecca, and she sent a ransom to free him. That was a necklace that her mom Khadija, who passed away then, gave her. Very valuable kind of an object to her, is more than an object, is her mother's memory. She sent to free her husband from her dad. And in that moment, see here the beauty when the conflict of belief, of the conflict of how to manage conflict. You can see in this story how to keep love and to keep respect. Abu As didn't force her to disobey, to abandon her faith. And she also, in here, as you see there, her reply, who will excuse and understand you if I don't? I will stay beside you and help you until you reach the truth, means until you believe in what I believe, because she's believing that this is the truth. So you see, they agreed. And this kind of something as well for relationships. What can we learn from here when the relationships go into conflict? And now is in a war, and her necklace back later on went to her dad. She promised him to support him. She kept her promise. Even in that, she didn't say, you were fighting my dad and you deserve it. She sent her necklace, the most valuable thing. And her dad, when the prophets saw the necklace, the prophet has not captive Zainab's husband. And he said, but when you go to Mecca, promise me to send her back now to Medina. Now the conflict is too far, and she's even not safe in Mecca. At those moments, the conflict is too high, she can be at risk in Mecca. He promised him to send her back, and with high respect between them, he sent back to Mecca and got the necklace, and the Prophet sent a message, don't give it another time. Don't give the necklace, no, this is for Khadija. Zainab will go to Medina. Few years later, waiting for her husband, refusing all proposals of marriage. She loved him so much, he loved her so much, they were waiting for each other, despite this divergence of belief. The Prophet did not force her to get married. People were saying Islam forced marriage. If anything that would be forced marriage will be in this case, when his in-law was fighting against him, and she refused to get married, and she was fine, waiting for her husband. After 6 years, Abu al-As her husband, came again to Medina, passed by, and he was captive as well. That was a high conflict. So, his merchants, his merchandise was captive, not himself. So he escaped. Where did he go? To his beloved previous wife, Zainab. He went to her house and asked for asylum, for protection. And she gave him protection before asking permission from her dad, the Prophet, and the leader of Medina. Here we are talking about agency again, so I don't want to go into the details of the seerah. But without some of the details, we cannot appreciate the agency. Because in Medina now, there was a war, and there was now after Uhud, and they lost so many in Uhud, and there was lots of pain and blood between the two. And to give an asylum to somebody of Quraysh, this is great offense could be to the community. But she believed that Allah has given her the right, because of the agreement of the constitution of Medina. There was a constitution that the Prophet did in Medina, and this constitution gave the believers and the community of Medina of non-believers the right to give these kind of things when they have to see the situation. So she used her kind of political rights in here without going back to her father. Said, please wait, I will ask my dad first, because I don't want to embarrass him in his community. He's not the sheikh, he's the Prophet, and he's the leader of the community. No, she didn't. She gave him asylum, and she said, you're protected, I'll give you. She went to the mosque when her dad, the Prophet, leading the prayer of Fajr, of the morning prayer, early morning prayer, she announced in the mosque, when her dad did not know before, that I gave protection to Abu al-As. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, have you heard what I heard? They said, yeah, I didn't know before, but we accept her protection. This is a woman in Islam, has the voice and has the rights like any other, no less. And she doesn't have to ask for permission for that and that, if this is the right for the equality that we are talking about. So we see here the character of Zainab, between the balance between emotion, love, care, strong character. She was not following her husband but loving him. She was waiting for that to happen one day. Al-As went from Medina to Mecca. He distributed the trusts to the Meccans. Then he set back to Medina as a Muslim, out of his will. He said, if I believed in you in Mecca, you would say, because I was captive. If I believed before, they would say he's following his wife. So now he came to the stand after many years. That is his choice. And you see here the agency of Zainab. They got married another time they just continued their previous marriage, back together as a husband and wife, and sadly, shortly later she died. But you see Zainab's example is great. The daughter of the Prophet to go and give protection at the time of high conflict without asking the Prophet's permission, and to go and announce in the mosque without fear from him. He would come and he would shout at me, and he would come and he'd say, why you embarrass me in front of the community? You're giving this to this kafir. No, that was not the case in her case. And you see that spirit of confidence, how these ladies were so confident at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Khawla bin Tha'laba, another example. I will not take too much time because I already spoke a bit about that. Khawla, she had a sense of ethics and a principle of justice. Her husband was an old man, Ubadah ibn Samit, she described him, not myself, she described him as an old man who had lost his temper, sometimes become angry, moody, things like that. He came and she replied to him in an argument. Then he said to her, "You are to me like my mother," means you are forbidden. I can of any intimate relationship with you. You are now like my mother, without being divorced. So before Islam, this means she will be not divorced and not married. She will be like that. He went out and then came back and he was trying to force her into an intimate relationship. In here, look, I cannot control your temper. You can say whatever you said. That's fine with you. But it's not fine with me now to force me into a relationship I believe is suspicious. I have ethics. And she thought, now you've done something, you said something that will forbid our relationships. I'll have to go to the Prophet and ask for our case. What is it? This is something not to keep silent about it. I will not keep submissive sitting at home and crying, or just go with your will for whatever you choose, your mood. She went to the Prophet ﷺ and she complained. Now, the Prophet, peace be upon him at the time, no Quran was revealed in this case. So when there is no Quran, they would go with the custom of what is in there. He said, be patient, go back to your husband, he's the one, he's your cousin, he's that, your relative, he's your relative. So no, Ya Rasulullah, she kept complaining, this is not, for me, I don't accept it. She believed Allah is the most just. She believed in Islam that she will not be oppressed. She believed she would have a voice. These are the principles why they converted to Islam and believed in this deen. So I'm not going to accept that this man, out of his mood, he will come one day saying to me, you are like my mom, and next moment he'll go out and come to me now is an intimate relationship. I'm not going to accept that. That's the argument on the kind of complaints about him and how this and how that. This shows an agency. So this woman, if she was not confident and she was not feeling secure and safe with this Prophet, peace be upon him, she would not keep, the argument and keep, trying to convince him. How come this doesn't make sense? So that's, for me, it shows how these ladies build those kind of agency in them, but without arrogancy, without transgression. You see in the example of Khawla, I am aware not to interpret this kind of incidents in our contemporary feminist frameworks, because I don't think they would fit. Because there is an ontological, means the philosophy of being, the philosophy of looking into the world and looking how we fit within this world is different. In here, Khawla was not seeing her relationship with man fighting a woman or woman fighting a man. She was looking at her relationship with Allah. Again, Allah is the most just. This will not be accepted. She wants to go back. She wanted to go back to her husband, but this something has to be stopped. And I don't believe that in my deen this is okay. So after the verses were revealed, Khawla, قد سمع الله قول التي تجادلك في زوجها. Allah heard the voice. So when we talk about voice, you have a voice. I think Surah Al-Mujadila for women, you have a voice. And this voice is heard by Allah. That's why Khawla one day she was walking down and she found Umar ibn Khattab when he was a Khalifa, the leader for all Muslims. And she stopped him and she started preaching to him. Be careful of Umar, this and that. And Umar was listening, not as a man, as a believer. Because both of them, they learned from the Quran. And both of them read their relationship, how they judge things is based on their relationship to Allah. So this is completely different. They're not in a fight. They have a point of reference to what they go, to where they go to judge the principles. And one man said, why are you listening so long to this woman? He said, this is a woman that Allah heard her, complain. How can I, Umar, not to listen to her? So this is another agency of women. When she stood up, that kind of bihar is called bihar. That kind of oath was cancelled in Islam, and some punishments were there for those who that. And also for Khabladan, that's fine, we got justice. Now, if I go to my husband, he cannot free a slave because to go back, he has to free a slave. This is another way in Islam to encourage freeing slaves. He couldn't, he said he couldn't. He is not able to. He said, okay, give some wealth. I said, that's not possible. The Prophet helped, he could not fast, he's an old man. So the Prophet helped her with some dates, and she said, I will help him with some dates. You see here now, she's not approaching it as a kind of a fight with a man. She's approaching it as a fight for justice, for human being, for insan. And the Quran is talking about insan, the human being. So she was here for a man and woman. This is about insan, about me as a human being, has dignity. I cannot be treated in this way. Once this is the lesson is learned, we can move on. Now I can help him from my own wealth for food, and he sorts out this problem, and then move on. So you see, is not just to humiliate her husband or anything, but to put the, to make it clear. Another agency, already I'll discuss this. Hani, another lady, is a daughter of Abu Talib, and you find her in Mecca, and it's very important to appreciate the agency, to see the context. After how many years? After 13 years in Mecca, and 8 years later on in Medina, when they went back to Mecca, the conquest of Mecca peacefully. Now these people, they oppressed them. These people, they persecuted them very badly. These people, in all means they killed, they tortured, they sent them away, they followed them even in Abyssinia when they migrated, they followed them in Medina, they made coalition to crush them in Medina altogether and to kill them all in Ahzab. These people, they did not leave any way to crush this religion and these believers as they could. But now, it's peaceful in Mecca, the Prophet conquered Mecca but peacefully, no bloodshed. However, there were few names. They were bitterly enemies to the Prophet and to the believers. They did a lot of harm. And one of them, he went to Hani. This man, the Prophet said, if you find this man, even if the hanging at the Kaaba, kill him. Because this man, they did so bad. He gave peace to all of Meccans, even Abu Sufyan, even those people who was an enemy. If you go to the house of Abu Sufyan, you are safe. Everyone is safe, except very few names. Now, this man is one of the criminals, so to say, the bitter enemies who were not forgiven. And now he went to Hani, and he asked for her protection. You could say Abu al-As had good relationship with the Prophet, so he gave her protection to his daughter. What about this man? And Hani gave him protection. She was confident. I have the right to give. She went to the Prophet. Ali came, her brother wants to kill the man, said you cannot kill him, I gave him protection. Now, if we're looking at men and women, this is a woman, Ali is a man of authority, a leader in the army, everything. You say, look at him, he's in the cousin of the Prophet, in law of the Prophet. Now, they went to the Prophet complaining. She said, I gave protection to this man. Ali wanted to kill him. And the Prophet replied to her very softly and kindly, without any argument, Oh Hani, we will grant asylum to the one whom you have granted asylum. No argument. You gave asylum. Your asylum is no less than any other man in our society. And that man was saved by Hani and was granted despite the anger of Ali who wanted to kill him at the moment. I will not go into these details of an agency. In summary, you find the second pledge of Al-Aqaba. The second pledge of Al-Aqaba. Just to give context again, the Prophet, peace be upon him, stayed in Mecca 13 years and stayed in Medina 10 years before he died. So 23 years are the years of his mission of da'wah as a prophet. He became a prophet at the age of 40, and you find 13 years in Mecca, they were oppressed, the persecution came came to the top. There were boycotts. That boycott, Khadija came out of it very weak and died afterwards. His uncle died by the end of the boycott as well. You find that the 10th year, the Prophet was in despair without any protection. Khadija died, his uncle died. They were in a great oppression in Mecca. You find some of the believers before they migrated to Abyssinia, before Medina, they migrated to Al-Habasha or Abyssinia, and women migrated with them. The first 2 women migrated, they believed. They made sacrifice to move away to another country. In those days, there is no WhatsApp to communicate or anything. There's no airplanes. They have to go through the dangers and they don't know what they expect on the other side. But the Prophet, peace be upon him, promised that there was a peaceful, there was a just ruler there, and they would be safe. So they went. 2 women went. Then later on, you find other women also went back. Amongst them, 18 women. Amongst them, Salama. Salama migrated to Abyssinia and migrated to Medina. She migrated to Abyssinia, came back with her husband. They heard the rumors that Meccans, they stopped the persecution, they are fine and safe. She came back. Then her agency appears in the first migration, in the second migration, where she decided to migrate for her belief to Medina to be safe. However, she was not allowed to travel. Her tribe said, look, you are going to migrate, that's fine, we cannot control you. You cannot take our daughter with you. We will keep her. And her tribe kept her. And she cried, she resisted, she did everything possible. She couldn't. But you see her agency here. She did not abandon her faith, despite the odds. She owned it. So her tribe against her, they said, she remained Muslim. What even happened, which was very painful, the tribe of her husband said, look, you're not allowing her to go with our son, we will not allow you to keep our child, her child. And the 2 tribes start pulling apart the baby, the child, the small child, till his arm was taken off here, from in front of her eyes. And her husband's tribe took her child away. Her husband now is in Medina. She was kept in the tribe near Mecca, and she was in despair. Her child is away from her, but she did not abandon her faith, despite all this. Her faith was not her husband's faith. That faith was hers. And she loved also, Salama loved her husband so much. She had a story, you can read about that story. But you see, Salama's agency here, migration, the first suffering and a long journey to Abyssinia, came back from that long journey, persecution of her husband, fear and everything. Now her husband is apart 1 year. She was crying every day on the suburbs of Mecca, waiting to travel to her husband and to be accompanied by her baby. After 1 year, she joined her husband in Medina. Now, this is another example of this lady, and there are many other examples in Medina that we find of this agency of women, of Muslim women. You find Safiya, you find Aisha and her agency through knowledge. You find many others. These are just I'm trying to give just some glimpse here and there. I hope I've done these great ladies some little justice, but there is a lot to learn as a Muslim woman. For me, I don't need somebody to give me a voice, because the Quran has given me my voice. My Lord heard a woman and complained her complaint to him directly, without anyone in between her and her Lord. And as well, it's about justice through that kind of framework. I don't need another framework. I have my framework through which I can find my rights, and I can find role models, and I can find my principles, and I can navigate how to defend and to have a voice. I don't need somebody like the partners in the Trojan horse to speak for my voice and to give me somebody to speak to me, because Muslim women, they cannot speak for themselves. Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much.
so much on. And when I asked her to come, she comes and doesn't hesitate every time. So subhanAllah, even in Sheffield, we're getting her to come and do some tafsir classes for our sisters. So jazakallah. She's a dear friend, a sister, and my teacher. So may Allah preserve you and reward you, inshallah, for everything you do for the ummah. Jazakallah. So when we were planning to do this, inshallah, I'll move on to the slides. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. We had a conversation, and some of the slides I've done are very much focused towards a predominantly non-Muslim audience. So I noticed here that it's a lot of a Muslim audience, so I might skip some of the slides if you let me. But also when we had a conversation, we wanted to have first a conversation around the women around the Prophet ﷺ, and then moving on to some of the contemporary challenges, what academics are speaking about in terms of challenges and opportunities in reference to Muslim women specifically. So I was going to start with a brief introduction in terms of Islam, but I won't, I think I will skip it. And then I'll move on to opportunities, challenges, and the way forward. And this kind of links in as well with regards to Fuller's section. I wanted her to keep talking. I think we should have given her all the time because she speaks about agency. And I'll be referring to that in a little bit more detail with regards to yourselves and what does agency mean to you. So, the purpose of life. We know in the Quran we are told we have only been created but to worship Allah. I have only created jinn and men that they should worship me alone. Do you think that we have created you in jest and that you could not be brought back to us for account? So we are slaves of Allah, seeking His mercy and forgiveness continuously, and in the sight of Allah, women and men are equal, and this is based on your deeds. This is what will distinguish us on the Day of Judgment in terms of our deeds and being believers. So I had the 6 articles of faith. I won't go into those. I'll move on quickly. So in terms of giants in history, they are forgotten first that we tend not to focus on within many contexts. And if we look back in terms of the history of Islam, it emancipated women in terms of rights and financial independence. The Prophet ﷺ, as Dr. Fuller has touched on, was the wife of Khadija, his wife, and was a businesswoman. She was widowed previously and was older than him. The first university was founded by a Muslim female, so Fatima al-Firi. She was Moroccan, in Morocco. And Islam throughout history and civilization recognized female leaders and scholarship. So I've also put up a picture of Tawakkul Qarman. So she is a human rights activist and won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011, and she's also a Yemeni journalist. So in contemporary culture, we see lots of Muslim women, and especially in 2000, we saw a rise of lots of leadership positions of women. So you've got some pictures here, and I'll go through them. So you have Zahra Muhammad, who's the first Muslim MCB leader, and is excelling in organizations, and various Muslim leaders who are women through education and social media. I did a podcast once with Sahima, and she's a word poet, and she has an anthology of poems. It's called Post-Colonial Banter, and she's challenging the negative stereotypes of women and this kind of binary of being oppressed and having critical thinking. So here as well, there's a picture of Dr. Farah Roslin. Any of you know her? She used to be a student and was a medic at this university, at QMC. She was doing her placement at Derby University, and the British Islamic Medical Association wrote a paper. And this was about wearing hijabs in surgery and how hard it was. So you tend to get less women generally in surgery, but also Muslim women, because of not having any suitable hijab and head covering to be a surgeon. So essentially this paper was done, and it's kind of published within the British Medical Journal. She read it and saw it and was like, well, I can do this in my trust. So at Derby, she helped to create a prototype, which then was put throughout the trust, and it went viral, and you would see the articles on BBC about all the work that she's done, mashallah, and she's currently leading the British Medical Association kind of policy changes with regards to the NHS as well. So we also see the rise of Muslim women in politics and media. So general elections saw the most diverse representation of Parliament, with 14 Muslim MPs taking a seat, 8 of them being women, and then you've got Najla there. But also, as I mentioned before, you have Muslim women as female reporters as well within Media. So Islamic feminism, this is contentious because from our perspective, we have Islam and we get our understanding, knowledge and theory from Islam. So Muslims apply an Islamic epistemological stance, this is theory of knowledge from Islam, and an ontological theory of being. So as Muslims we're realists and we see, for example, the existence of humans, and we understand of the everyday is through this, and this is given precedence over, for example, the narrative or the lens of feminism. So within Western framework, there's a lot of discussion around women demanding rights through early feminism. So you had the suffragettes and then the rise of feminism. So you had the second wave, which happened first and second wave in the 1970s onwards. But in terms of for Islamic theology and for Muslim women, we have so many rights that were established in our history. And so Sister Fudla had touched on Surah Al-Mujadila, but also if you look at the verses in Surah Talaq, for women who are going through divorce, the levels of protection that a woman has, and even in terms of marriage generally. So we need to also then think about challenging boundaries and frameworks of a right type of feminism and what this is. So in post-modernity, people are falling into kind of this understanding of culture, religion, but kind of mixing it together as opposed to distinguishing what is culture and what is religion. So patriarchy, most of that comes from an understanding of culture as opposed to religion, and it can present various challenges. So as individuals, men and women are diverse and complex and cannot simply be reduced to kind of specific dichotomies. And here then we'll talk a little bit about intersectionality. But just going back to feminism and understanding kind of the world order of knowledge and theory, we have to understand colonialism and organisation of societies. So there's some work done, and when you're thinking about terms like feminism or racism, these are based on what's happened previously. So world during colonial period and it was organised post through global racial ethnic hierarchies. So Western versus non-Western people, a global patriarchal hierarchy, so global gender systems, a global religious hierarchy, a global linguistic hierarchy, and these hierarchies then tend to create, the right way and a them and us, so the othering of those that are seen, for example, as not Western. So the package of entangled powers of hierarchy of the world system is broader and more complex than what is frequently theorized in modern colonial, westernized, Christian-centric, capitalist and patriarchal world systems. So that's something to factor in. So anyone know anything about intersectionality? No? No? So intersectionality is a term that was coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw within the US, and it talks about this agent. So this is being a woman, for instance, and you have all these aspects that make up your agency, okay? So I'll explain it in a little bit more. So just to go back, she also was the founder of this organisation, which is saying her name, so there's lots of racism and death occurred by police brutality on black women in America. So she's done a lot of work around that. So intersectionality, what is this? Crenshaw talks about women and the experience of oppression in various configurations and in varying degrees of intensity. So cultural patterns of oppression are not only interrelated but are bound together and influenced by intersectional systems of society. So here we've got agent of a Muslim woman. She's education, class, language, culture, gender, age, race, religion, and ability. So intersectionality, certain groups of Muslim women have multiple facets in life and they have to deal with this. So within feminism, it demands sometimes a very clear, you fit in this category, but we understand that that's not one size fits all. So for example, with myself, I'm a Muslim woman, but I'm Asian. I can go into lots of things about that, but then I've experienced aspects of racism and sexism based on my identity. So there's lots of research also shows that Muslim women face double discrimination, each woman choosing how to kind of convey a story or have different stories. Two aspects of race and gender tend to intersect, and they can impact by forces beyond the control of a person. So Muslim women are socially marginalised, they face dilemmas and challenges as a consequence of their race and gender. When all these social dynamics come together, it creates challenges which are very unique. So my experiences to yourselves would be very different to someone else in the room based on your intersectional identities. So intersectionality has been used recently in a lot of academia because it raises awareness of BAME, women specifically, and how they live their lives. So internationally, I want to now move on about some of the challenges. Anyone know who this is?
Muskan.
Say again?
Muskan.
Excellent.
India.
Muskan Khan, excellent. So, some information about her. She was a student, and is a student, and she was heckled in Jade, and this was in Karnataka, and say on, this was back in, I think 2 weeks, Tuesdays ago, and she shouted, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest, and this was in response to standing up to the way they were being heckled at. So Muskan Khan, the student whose iconic rebuttal to a group of males who heckled her for wearing her hijab, has made waves across the country and say she did not say Allahu Akbar to offend those who were saying Jai Shri Ram, but only to give her courage and strength. So this is also, it went viral, it was on Twitter, and this is just some of the kind of Twitter feeds that were coming up with regards to how she was being harassed. So then when we look at some of the challenges, that's internationally, and coming a bit closer, when we look at Europe, for instance, we have, and many of you will know, in April 2021, France's Conservative-led Senate approved amendments to its so-called anti-separatism bill that, if it passed into law, will ban girls under the age of 18 from wearing their hijab. Now, UK. Many of us are visibly Muslim, so this is one of the things that we have to navigate, and there are challenges of this. So there are lots of statistics that are out there, and there's even current ones that are coming out which talk about the experiences of Muslim women as being victims of hate crime. So anti-Muslim attacks rose by 26% last year, with most, and this is talking about 2016, occurring face-to-face rather than on social media. And women are the targets of Muslim hate crimes specifically. So Islamophobia and attacks were mostly directed towards Muslim women. So gender variances in attacks. So in 2017, the data it showed that 6 out of 10 of the victims who experienced anti-Muslim hate were women, and this was on a street level, and 8 in 10 of the perpetrators were male and predominantly white, and this was reaffirming the findings over the years that anti-Muslim hate and or Islamophobia at street level is also a male and female abuse in addition to anti-Muslim hatred and bigotry. And statistics have countless kind of evidence to show Islamophobia to be gendered. So Muslim women targets of Islamophobic violence, and I might sound quite negative here, but I want to talk about what the reality is and what's being shown within academia and the media currently. So in the UK, the majority of victims of Islamophobic violence were women, particularly visibly Muslim women, so those that wore hijab. And the European Monitoring Centre for Racism and Xenophobia found that 15 countries in the EU, there was a common pattern of visible Muslim women being attacked. So gendering anti-Muslim racism. So racialization, anyone know what racialization is? So essentially it's describing identity. Yep, like that. Did you have a point? No? Okay. So essentially it's describing identities that you don't necessarily kind of affiliate to yourself. So this is how groups are racialized. So Muslims can be racialized and put into one group as such. So in the context of anti-Muslim racism, this means the stereotypes of Muslim women and Muslim men are different but are mutually essential to one another. So veiling and hijab and niqab is about dehumanizing the burqa, full face wear, and this was included in the UK election manifesto, and this shows how kind of acceptable it is to even have it in a political landscape. And the presumption that women are forced to wear hijab by male relatives, women are pressured to remove their veils out of fear of anti-Muslim discrimination or violence. This was quite a while ago, so many of you might not know or remember or not be born maybe. So Jack Straw in 2006 asked niqab-wearing constituents to remove her veil. He described it as a visible statement of separation and difference, Britishness and this was part of the Britishness debate at the time. So Blair also post-7/7 talked about the niqab being a sign of extremism. So gendered Islamophobia. So most of the understandings also are that, you know, in Islam, forced marriages and honour-based violence are kind of a norm, and whereas they're cultural practices that are ascribed to faith. And this is emphasised through like a lot of the government work, the reports that are written and recommendations on, and also have become essentialised, sensationalised and racialised. So gendering, the war of terror, so David Cameron, when he was leading the Conservative Party and as Prime Minister, made comments about Muslim women being traditionally submissive, promoting funds to teach women, Muslim women specifically English, in order to combat terrorism. So this was an IPPR report found Muslim women face barriers in all forms of employment opportunities and other everyday opportunities. So now thinking about also the youth and Muslim youth, so 15-year-old British Muslim girls joined ISIS, and Muslim girls are increasingly being characterised as dangerous and danger, submitting to a male-dominant violent religion, needing to be saved, but at the same time they are also terrorists. So this framing is really problematic and not necessarily seeing them as vulnerable or being groomed. There is also other evidence, so there's a media executive, Kelvin Mackenzie, and he spoke, and this was after the Nice attack, and Fatima Manji, she was reporting on Channel 4, and he said it was one in the eye of an ordinary viewer who looks at the hijab as a sign of slavery of Muslim women by a male-dominated and clearly violent religion. So that was some of the comments made. And these are by leaders and leadership positions at these media agencies. So intersectional examples of Muslim women and form of discrimination. In a lot of reports, in a lot of work, you'll see that Muslims face a triple penalty. So this is being a woman, being BAME, and also being Muslim. So on the employment prospects, being women, being BAME and being Muslim is seen as barrier and not able to kind of advance and have social upward mobility in terms of employment. So this is a report done by the Women's Inequalities Committee on Muslims in the UK, and this is linking it to employment. It also shows that there is a double bind of Islamophobia. So wearing the veil, they're seen as, and this is perceived as having the second skin, and creates this more discrimination, increases it. So lack of social mobility of women within the employment sector. So myself and a colleague, we did a report and we looked at actually Muslim students in higher education, and we found there were lots of more Muslim women as opposed to Muslim men who were students and were not necessarily dropping out, they were graduating, but as soon as they got out of education, getting a job, they faced lots of roadblocks. So framing problem, intersectional gender discrimination is needed to understand narratives, stories, gaps in law which do not safeguard Muslim women from specific discrimination. So you have Islamophobia again, gendered and racist. This is a schoolgirl, her headscarf was ripped off in a shocking attack, but the school insisted it wasn't racist, so it wasn't a targeted attack for her being Muslim and for her hijab to be ripped off. And more recently, we see in New Zealand, the Muslim student had her hijab pulled off, and there's a kind of viral campaign, Justice for Huda, that you might come across. So there's also then the political discourse, and we have it in terms of the rise of racism post-Brexit, but also kind of Boris Johnson making the comments about Muslim women, referring to them as letterboxes and bank robbers, and how kind of toxic that type of language is from the leader of this country. So Islamophobic hate crimes have increased significantly after terrorist attacks 9/11/7/7, and the rhetoric post-Trump's elections, who led presidency, and prior to it actually, and then Brexit and the rise of the far-right groups and ISIS-inspired terrorist attacks across the world have promoted a climate where Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiment has become legitimised. Yeah? So it's okay to say what you like, essentially, without it being policed or seen as a hate crime. So the claim that Islam oppresses women in ways significantly different from and worse than the ways in which are treated in other religions and cultures is a reoccurring theme and is part of press coverage and comments. So then this idea as well about essentializing, so essentializing people, and and a Muslim man and a woman being this one heterogeneous, homogeneous group, but essentially we're all different and therefore we're heterogeneous. And these are explored in terms of identities in varying degrees and complexities. Okay? And here it just says about kind of how Muslims are clumped together in one big group and generalizations are made. So gendered Islamophobia, so there's a constant othering that occurs as well of Muslim women. This is a masjid within the north there, and you can see there's a swastika there. They demolished it and did lots of, they got in basically, broke in and just vandalized. So this dehumanization, the sociologist that spoke about it is looking at history. So Beck speaks about, by looking at history, we need to shape the present. So these are parallels that run pre-World War II. So the discrimination and ostracization of Jews was prevalent in propaganda, legal systems, and creating a ghettoization of Jewish communities. And so this is something that we see a recurrent theme of symbols and religious symbols being seen as threatening, for instance. So Islamophobic violence against Muslim women is both racist and violent and gendered. So overcoming the stigmatized identities, the challenges. So this is what we tend to see, and this continues to happen, which is looking at overcoming anti-Muslim racism. So in public civil society voices and the rise of activism, you have Muslims within arts, media, sports, and there's some comedy people there. And so civil society and groups need to work together to challenge forms of racism and prejudice. This was stated in the Runnymede Trust report as a recommendation with regards to tackling some of the challenges with Islamophobia. And then countering Islamophobia, normalization of Muslim women and their identities in mainstream media. And you have some examples there. So Visit My Mosque is something that's done by Muslim Council Britain. And looking at public access to Muslims, normalising, humanising Muslim identities, and departing from othering and belonging to British society. But when I look at that as well, do we have to have people in kind of these positions in order for us to be legitimised? Can I just be grumpy on a bus and just be having a bad day and just be grumpy Abida as opposed to grumpy Muslim women? They're all like this. That's something to think about. So there's this constant need to have to, the onus is on the individual to have to overcome these negative identities that are being framed and created and we all know are simply not true. So, uniting against racism. So Beck states, looking at the past, we can understand our future. In France, there was a burkini ban, and it was denying women their agency, and it was inspired by Rosa Parks and the politics of the 1960s. And so several women defied France's ban of burkini in public pools, and other women, non-Muslim women, joined them in this. So Trump suggested that all the 4 congresswomen can leave and go back to where they came from, and all this did was kind of unite and mobilise people to work harder together against kind of racist discourse. Then you have things like the World Hijab Day that happened recently, and then you have lots of networks that are working together. But one thing that's quite interesting, and I'll put a distinction there, is that there's an acknowledgement of anti-Semitism and it's seen within law, but when it comes within Islamophobia, there's still a lobby and still lots of work that's being done to even get it acknowledged and accepted as something to then, prosecute people against. So that's something to have a think and reflect about. So I brought a book with me, and this was mainly for some of our non-Muslim brothers and sisters, but this is a book by Nigel Roberts. It's an excellent book. It talks about the celebration of Muslim women. It's got some really funny bits in it, but she talks about her own journey and what the veil means to her. So if you can, do have a look at that. And so now I have a video clip that I want you to show. Then shall we have a go? Let's see if it works.
Country, I was walking down the street. The first time I was told to go back to my own country, I was walking down the street. I had my child in a pan, and I had a young a metal leash wrapped around his fist. And then he was like, yeah, you F off to, go back to your own country. And I was sure that he was going to do something, but he actually just came over and just shouted at me again, go back to your own country. I'm going to try and get emotional. But it was just, first of all, your love for this country, you don't know if your love for this country is bigger than the love I have for this country. I'm proud to be Scottish. This is my country.
Aisha was born and raised in Scotland and found faith when she was 18. She has a YouTube channel where she often gets abused.
You're a traitor, an extremist, you're dumb. You head till, you ninja, get back to where you're from. You're an influenced little girl who knows nothing about the world. You were a victim, and that's the reason why you turned. When I'm putting videos out online, the comments, the feedback I get is often more negative than it is positive. And that is just because I choose to be who I am.
How often do people assume that you're not from the UK?
All the time, every single day, and there's nothing more funny than being in a situation where people think that you don't even speak the language and they're speaking in front of you.
If you were in a situation where someone had said to you that you need to go back to where you come from, how would you reply to them?
I'd say, let's go, let's grab a bus, it's just down the road. My house is just down the road, so come with me. Do you want tea? Do you want to know more? The assumption doesn't offend me, it's how you treat me after it. Seeing something that's different, there's a fear that comes with that. So it's the fear of the unknown. And I feel like that's why me saying, come with, let's talk. I feel like that will take away that fear, and then ultimately what you get is just two average people talking about differences in life.
Aisha's story really hit me in a way that I didn't expect. Just being out and about with her, I saw firsthand the verbal abuse she receives. It was quite aggressive and othering, and I was really angry for her and at them.
So what we're going to do now is it on here? Let's see. We're just going to get you to, with the people that are next to you, but also via Slido, if there's a QR if you want to scan that, is to discuss themes around identity as faith, or being visibly Muslim. And what did you take from the clip? Go back to where you came from, so the clip you've just seen. What are your perceptions of Muslim women? This is mainly for non-Muslims within the group as well. And any reflections you have from Dr. Fuller's and the session that I've just done too. So should we... questions for Sister Fuller as well that are very specific, so I'm going to just ask them. Feel free to put what you want as well on Slido. We'll kind of have a read of those as we go along. So the first one is, do Muslim women have to give up working or taking care of the children, or they can't take care of children? Does that say, do Muslim women have to give up working or they can't?
Women have to give up working if they can't take care of the children. The question is not yes or no. Sorry. The answer is not yes or no. Because we have in Islam the higher objectives of Sharia, and this only Sharia scale with. Sharia is more than Sharia. It's actually the whole system of Islam together. And this whole system, when we deal with it in fragmented way, we get kind of sketches. We don't get the real kind of a picture. So when we are talking about this answer, we have to say what are the duties for the rights and duties upon man and woman in the family. So what is a family? How we see the family? How we see the relationships? If I look at this, if the family, if they're married and they're both working and to support and sustain, and if they need both of them to work, and the children, they need care, obviously if I ask you if there is a conflict of care for the child, and we cannot we try to sort all the ways, and there is no way to sort it out. So who has priority here? I think the children, they need some priority here, their health. When I said health, not only physical and mental and future. Looking at a holistic kind of approach to the children, then we have to look what are the possible ways to sort it out. Because there are many other possible ways. Could be the extended family, for example, give that kind of support. If we have the extended family to give that type of support, we don't have that conflict. If we don't, can I have part-time? Can I take some time off? And means here, it's not yes or no, it's actually about the, what are, if I say to evaluate, if we work, all of us to work in different settings, and what we do, like in programs, for instance, I have as a course leader before, by the end of the year, I have to evaluate my program, and I have to evaluate the pros and cons and the achievement and the downsides. Why don't we do that with our decisions? So when I do this decision, I have to look for what are the advantages of these options and what are the disadvantages of these options, the short term, the long term, and I should not be just short-sighted and looking at the kind of, I may earn 1,000, 2,000 pounds per month, but I may lose for the long term my child. So it's in here when you really need, as a husband and wife, this is an institution of marriage, and what they need is to discuss their goals and to discuss, this is Shura-based. How I see the family based on what I've learned about Islam is the family is an institution that is a unit in the society. And we have to look at it based on the Islamic values of justice, of fairness, of dignity, of care, of compassion. The marriage relationship is based on compassion and mercy. And I have to look at this, so the husband will not ask his wife to bear more than she can bear, and this and vice versa. Is actually about mercy and compassion in that relationship. If they sit together, also is not a dictatorship in the family. I have to interpret the text based on the life of the Prophet, because he is the embodiment of the Quran and the teachings of Islam. The Prophet was in Shura, in consultation with his wives. Salama in Hudaybiyah, which is a great incident, he was in consultation in Hudaybiyah. Hudaybiyah was, they went to make Umrah in Mecca, a minor pilgrimage, and in there the Quraysh said you cannot go. And they had to go back, set back to Mecca, and obviously they have to shake their heads and the Umrah there. That was the companions could not grasp that. How can we make kind of agreement with the Qurayshis with all these conditions which are unfair? And they start to resist to end their Umrah in there. Salama suggested, the Prophet came to Salama, his wife, and asked her that I'm concerned about the companions because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And she said, why don't you go out and ask somebody to shave your hair, and they will do it and they will follow. So she acted here with her husband, who's the authority in the society, the community, and he was the Prophet, he's another authority, spiritual authority. He asked her opinion. And why not husbands ask the opinions and have this consultation and shura? So to decide a decision like this is not yes or no because she is a woman, she has to look straight away, the answer is yes. And it's not either, because if the baby is young, is a newborn, and there is no one to care for, if I threw that baby in a nursery and not caring and healthy and this and that with the conditions, I think there are consequences ethically and morally. We need to care for this. But again, from one family to another, the decision will be different, and they need to really sit together in respect, in compassion, and they see all the options possible, and based on that, they can decide. I hope I answered the question, because it's not yes or no in here. It's difficult. As personal experience, I came across this kind of conflict at times, and I took time off. I'm not saying Islam said this. This is my choice that I made based on this, and I took some time off when my babies are young. And I study online, distance. I worked from home, and I prefer to breastfeed all my children up to 2 years. As possible. Some of them 1 year, 16 months, and 2 of them 2 years and over. So this is my dedication, and I see it as a moral towards the rights of that child on me to give them this kind of a base foundation of the early years that they can see kind of settled. And later on, then many other arrangements I made to continue my studies and my work and my ambitions without conflict with my children.
You used to also bring your children to Haifa as well, so they used to see mom doing lots.
Yeah, and my husband looking after them in the car as well when possible.
So, if her husband refuses her to do something, does she have to listen?
First, what is this something? It's not an order of he will order and she will have to follow, or she will order and he has to follow. We have to understand how the relationship in Islam, the marital relationship, the marriage, is a constitution based on consultation, based on rahmah. جَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Mawaddah means love and care. It's not only love and hope, it's love and care. And compassion is a rahmah. So in that relationship of compassion, he is asking her to do something beyond her, is harming her or beyond her ability. Obviously that's wrong. She doesn't have to obey that, because there is another hadith, la darara wa la dirar. There is no harm. Harm should not be caused. And so based on this hadith in Maqasid, the husband cannot ask the wife to do something that is harming her or causing her harm in any way, and vice versa. However, in the family, the man has his responsibilities and his rights, and the woman has her responsibilities and his rights. And I think this is in every institution we have, not only in the family. And this is where they go to the judge. When they reach the judge, in that case, then they will bring that kind of code. But if they deal with that code on day to day, I think life will not be peaceful. I'll give an example. I will go to something that people ask me a lot. Can the wife say no to her husband in an intimate relationship? And there is a hadith that is usually misunderstood, because it's understood in terms of dictatorship, in terms of like Wali al-Amr to obey the authority of the country, and you find some kings, they are killing people, throwing them in prisons, thinking that they have the authority to do so because they are the Wali al-Amr. So So here as well, if we have to look for the rights. So if the woman, for example, in this relationship, and I'm not saying this my interpretation, I'm saying this based on sources, those details, and not the YouTube and shortcuts from here and there. There are rights. If there is harm on this woman of having this, say for example, she was after childbirth, he's not allowed to force her into that relationship. It's haram even to have a relationship with her. During her period, for example, from an Islamic perspective, he's not allowed to force her to have this. If this man is not clean and really smelly and she doesn't want to come close to him in this way, she has the right to say no. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ clarified that the rights of to beautify yourself to your wife, she has the right as well as you have the right to beautify yourself to her. And also the Quran saying this, وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. People usually they stop at the man have the degree, but they don't treat the first one, that they have rights. They have the rights that you have to give them as you have rights, the similar rights on each other. So to help her means if this man is abusing her in the relationship, and this is why she's hating the relationship, she has the right to say no, change your attitude. Because there shouldn't be any harm. In the Sunnah, you learn from the Sunnah how the Prophet ﷺ conduct that, the kind of cares for the needs. If this man is not caring for the needs of his wife in the relationship till she hates him, then she can say no till they negotiate and come. They can even take it to the judge, to the courts in this case, to be fair and kind of a neutrality to investigate the situation. Other cases as well, if this man having other relationships with other women, for example, is cheating on her, basically, and she is haram and not allowed, and she has the right to say no, as kind of this is her disrespectful kind of relationship in here. And she has the right to say, you need first to sort out our problems, because this is, cheating with her other illnesses can come through that body kind of interact. Also, psychologically, if this is abusing her psychologically, and she's hating him, not caring for her kind of, and coming straight away to the relationship, of course she has the right as well to say no. Islamically, I'm not talking here, and you can go and I can share with you some of the resources. These are when there is harm, when there is reason. The same thing, the rights here in the relationship is not, there is an assumption that man has rights upon the woman. The women, they don't have rights upon man. They also have rights. And also man have rights, in both ways. So of course as well, if man wants, if the woman asks the man for her relationship and he refuses, he doesn't have the right to do so. And she can take him to court, because she has needs as well, they have to be fulfilled. And because this is a relationship that everyone has duties, and part of this, when zina is haram, to have a relationship outside marriage in Islam is forbidden, but the rights of people to be kept as well, to fulfill their needs also has to be met in that relationship, both for men and for women alike. So if man as well use the relationship to stop, not to give the rights for his wife, he's spiritually he's sinful, and he will be in front of his Lord as well, be asked why. But also if she takes him to a court based on Islamic law, he will also be judged and punished for that, and asking for her rights. So she has rights upon him and he has rights upon her. So the rights here is not one way. And to have this relationship based on compassion, based, as we said, Zainab, how she initiated the conflicts, I think this is how it go forward. As I say, if the wife is sitting the whole day and the husband is outside working, and I'm not saying his stereotypes, but I'm just giving the worst scenario. She's doing nothing, and he comes and he has to do everything, and this is the daily. She's on her Facebook, she's on the WhatsApp, she's doing that, and he said, there are things not done. So in this case, Of course, he has, if he takes this to judge within the family, she has duties that she has to fulfill. If vice versa, this man is not taking care of her, is not spending on the family, is not doing his duties, of course it's the same. What if they're both working? It's not fair if they're both working, coming home, and he's putting his, sitting down, and she's the woman to go and cook for him and put him on the plate. They're sharing the finances, and she's helping him. She's supporting him, he has to support her in other things as well, in the work at home and everything. This is about compassion. There is no compassion whatsoever if she's ill and he's well, and is asking her to do things that she can't do. Or, as I said, if she's studying, he's studying, they come home, why not sharing everything and working together? The Prophet was in the service of his family, of his wives. He had many wives in Medina, but he was in their service. He would milk the goat in the morning, means preparing the breakfast for his wives before he would go to Fajr time. Before going out, he would serve himself. He would care for his shoes. Despite all the love they have for him, and despite all the responsibilities they have, he had outside. So in both ways, I think the relationship for a woman to care with compassion about her husband, and as a human being, and he has needs, has to be fulfilled, and vice versa as well. In as walahunna, and to them means the rights for them مثل الذي عليهن, and similar to what they have upon them, means of duties. And if we take this rule and we look at each other, and for both of them, the husband and wife, they care for the needs of each other fairly, without causing harm, and with compassion, and negotiating the conflict, as we've seen. The conflicts, they don't go to war, they don't go to war like in Zayd with her husband, and they sort out those conflicts. So I think this is how it should be, the approach, and not the judging, because I see lots of those questions, judging, give me, what is the right, what is it? It's good to know the rights, and it's good to know, but it's good to know that this relationship is based on communication, and is based on compassion and respect and dignity. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have, the Bani Adam, we have given dignity to the offspring of Adam. And these are male and female. So both male and female in this relationship should live with dignity and respect.
So there's quite a few questions. So how are we doing for as in for time? Is it okay to go? Yeah. So there's so the next one is, what is the role of Muslim women in society? I think you covered it briefly, but also then we see the impact of Instagram and Facebook and all these things about particular standards of beauty. So how do you deal with society's standards of beauty?
From an Islamic perspective, first, what is the role? I think this is an important question. What is the role of women, Muslim women in society? Usually the stereotype is Muslim women are at home, they do nothing, they cook, they're in the kitchen, they clean, and that's fine. And this stereotype is not only from non-Muslim societies, also in some Muslim cultures that are not embedded with Islamic values. And I have no problem with the kitchen, I have no problem with cooking, because I love cooking, and when I have stress from writing an academic paper, I go baking. It just release my stress and enjoy. I really feel happy when my children are eating my food, and I really have a sense of pleasure. I don't have this kind of, then I have to keep away from my kitchen. It's a skill in life. To feed oneself is a skill in life. However, I don't see my role as a Muslim woman, as my understanding from the seerah of the Prophet is restricted to cooking and cleaning. I think these are services. We can put many things to fulfill these services in many ways. These are just necessities of life. We have to help each other to do these things. My role is more than that. Is about istikhlaf on earth. Means to do right and to stand for right and to stand for good in this life, in society. So in every aspect in society that I can do good in it, as a Muslim woman, I see my duty to, if I can, to contribute to this. For example, environment. Why not care for the environment? Even though we have many texts in Islam about caring for the environment. Why not standing for the oppressed even though we have many in the seerah standing to defend the oppressed, whether it's oppressed from amongst our communities, Muslim communities or non-Muslim communities. The Prophet in Hilf al-Fudul stood up for justice, to support those non-Muslims before. He was not a prophet even, and he later on as a prophet he said, if I attempt this Hilf al-Fudul, I will do it again. So I think an active role, I see a Muslim woman's role based on my understanding of the Quran and the Seerah and the examples of Zawjat Fir'aun and Maryam alayhi salam and other companions, is an active role in society at every aspect that does not break her ethics and moral conduct, Islamic ethics and moral conduct. Anything that doesn't break my principles as based on my understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah and the ethics and moral conduct, I will stand for it, and I will try my best to take, and this is a responsibility, part of the role of istikhlaf parents. Allah knows best. The question of beauty.
Yes, standards.
The standards of beauty are linked to our philosophy, I like freedom. Our philosophy of existence. Why are we in this world? How did we come to this world? What is our relationship with nature? What is our value as human beings? The dimensions, as my dimensions as a human being, what are my dimensions as a human being? Ontology, am I being? From an Islamic perspective, we have the body and we have the soul. Of course, we have other faculties of the reason, the mind, and we have the qalb, the heart, and we have all this. But what is the priority in my life from an Islamic perspective is the eternal dimension, which is linked to my spirituality, which is linked to the values, which are linked. So as a human, I am more than the body. As a human, from an Islamic perspective, I stand up for the values, my actions, my relationship to Allah, and my relationship to people should be according to my relationship to Allah, how He asks me to do. Therefore, if I value too much on the body, I'm not saying the body is not, and you should not look at the body at all. If somebody getting married or don't care about how your spouse, how your partner, should look like. No, this is the Prophet ﷺ said to a companion, go and look at her. Maybe you feel good, means you feel kind of connection, which is saying nowadays chemistry. So this is nothing wrong, but to exaggerate the body, to objectify the human being, to become the woman becomes the object of the media. She's and looking beyond her kind of human, her essence, her other achievements beyond, the body is trust from Allah, has given us this trust. And in Islam, we are not valued by body, based on the man companions. Once I give you that example, maybe it clarifies the point. They were sitting together, and a man came who's very good looking, wealthy, and everything, passed by the companions, and they said to him, he said to them, ask the companions, what do you think about that man? They said, this man is a good man, is the meaning. If he asked for to get married, we should give him. If he this and if he that, we really praised him. And later on, another man passed by, he was poor and is not as good looking, and as the previous one said, he asked them, what do you think about this man? And they said, oh, this man, if you ask for a hand of a girl, we will not give him, and if this and that. And he said, by Allah, this man means the latter one, the poor one, the one that didn't look as good physically and wealthy and everything, is heavier, is having more weight, having huge weight and status in Allah's sight than the first one. The first one is nothing, but the last one is the one of value. So the value doesn't mean, the body doesn't give the Muslim value for the hereafter. It's actually our actions, how we act in life, what our values and principles, these are the main thing. The body is for our connection. People get married, they have the right to see and to see what they chemistry, but Islamically, the compromise should not be on principles. and values, because these are what you live. And also, as a human being, your value is not your body. So as a woman, even if you age, even if you are at 90 years old, you are still young at heart by your values and by what you stand for. Khadija died at old age, but she remained young and beloved to the heart of the Prophet ﷺ till he died. He always looked at her, the one, he praised her once, Aisha, the young lady, clever, intelligent, when she said, by Allah, Allah has given you, always mentioning this lady. And she was jealous. By Allah has given you, exchanged you with someone better, means herself. She was young and beautiful and pretty and active and clever. And the Prophet ﷺ was always the man who would pass things and forgive and help, and he was angry at that time. And she said, I never seen him kind of angry at me like that. He didn't shout at her at all, but when he's angry, his face changed to red. And he said, by Allah, Allah has never exchanged me someone better than Khadija. She stood up with me when people abandoned me. She did that, she did that, she believed in me when people belied me. These are the values of beauty that he was looking for. This is a question. These are the values of beauty that the Prophet ﷺ evaluated Khadija based on which. And also Khadija, she valued the Prophet ﷺ based on his truthfulness, standing up for justice, is honesty, and his generosity to the guests. She did not say he was handsome, you are a handsome man, you are a man of nobleness, you are the lineage of Ibrahim. She did not use any of those kind of characteristics, of those criteria. She used other criteria to see the beauty in her husband, and he used similar criteria to see the beauty of his wife. I hope this answered.
So I'll just take these two quickly because they're related to kind of bigotry. How do Muslim women safeguard themselves from bigotry here in the UK? So one of the things is, and it's kind of mobilising and uniting people together to see and actualise it as a problem first. And one of the things that we have is an underreporting of crimes that happen towards Muslim women. So when there's not, and there is a lack of evidence, it's really hard to get change. So essentially a lot of work that I'm involved in and others, we tend to have evidence that's written in oral evidence and present that at government level to then bring about change. So I was speaking to you earlier about the hijab for surgeons. We developed a prototype, and for VIMA, what we did is we did a report and we showed evidence that within the NHS there was racism and Islamophobia towards Muslim women healthcare professionals. And based on that, we also said that the hijab as a dress code, nurses were bullying senior doctors who wore hijab about that wasn't proper clothes to wear within NHS setting. So one of the things we did was evidence it, ensure that that data was out there, and then we were able to get national policy changes within the NHS and also through BMA, so the British Medical Association. And based on that now, the Scottish Government is working to develop the same policy changes for their kind of area of NHS that they're working in. So it's about kind of reporting and doing what you can. Very quickly as well, in your personal experience, is it only fact education that solves the problem? Like if you simply inform some narrow-minded men that Khadija radiallahu was a businesswoman, then do they turn a new leaf, or is there some other work that needs to be done to develop the thinking? So subhanAllah, I used to be in the ISOT many years ago, and we just worked on developing relationships with everyone around us. So I spoke to some, and I think I mentioned to you, we had porters, so they were called Dave and Kevin, and they were our porters in Portland Building, and literally every Ramadan, every Eid, we used to invite them along to come and sit with us, and just befriending them, and they got to know us. So one was an ex-policeman, and he always used to mention that, subhanAllah, his perception of Muslim women was a particular way, but the more he interacted with both Muslim brothers and sisters, it really helped to kind of break those negative stereotypes that he had himself. So I think that's really important, where interaction can be done is a really good approach. Sorry, I'll go back to Fuller's questions, because there's loads, mashallah. This is a lovely question. I really want, if we can answer this one. I feel like answering it, but I won't. How can I deal with the anxiety and fear of what people will think if I start wearing hijab? Inshallah, trying to start wearing one, but anxious about it. So if you want to talk to me at the end, feel free to do so, but I'll pass over to Fulla as well.
If you have some thoughts, please.
No, go for it. They're going to be personal reflections, so you go for it, inshallah.
I think here we come back to the question, what is beauty? Because when you see beauty as very physical, then the physical becomes so dominant in how I see myself and how I feel in the public space. And then if I put on the hijab, obviously I'm hiding. I have to admit, you are hiding part of your of beauty, like your hair and things. You cannot dress in certain ways, and as part of your ethical and moral of hijab. But if I review my kind of priorities and my own kind of values and principles, then and how I define my beauty, and I use different criteria, then perhaps this will help. People are different, because this is a personal question. I think is more of these questions. People they have different issues, and a generic answer will not help. However, generally is about how I evaluate myself, this anxiety, how I evaluate myself when I wear it. Is it the anxiety because of what people think about me, how they see me, the assumptions, or is it because I don't see myself as pretty as without hijab, or because of the hurdles that I may face in my on my way? Means the experiences are different. I never experienced that before, so I don't know. I put on the hijab at age 13 in Algeria, willingly, not forced. Actually, my dad didn't want me to put the hijab on. At the time, he said, you are young, and a secular system in Algeria, and they used to call us like tents, walking tents, ugly grandmothers. Actually, our teachers used to kind of come, and the first day, strike me on my head. You'll be stupid because you closed your ears with this kind of piece of cloth, she used something that we clean the floor with it. But I think that experience gave me more of attachment to my hijab, to be honest. Is if I see myself, I don't, see that is, I can make a change about hijab, and hijab doesn't, I believe that hijab doesn't stop me from my studies, from being successful, from working, from interaction. Actually, hijab gave me that kind of confidence that I want people to deal with me, who I am, what I think, rather than how I look. But people different. People are different, and I appreciate that kind of anxiety that I prefer. This is one-to-one rather than general, but hopefully this helps. The criteria perhaps help.
Yeah, inshallah. As I said, you can speak to me at the end. I chose to wear hijab as well. I come from quite a loud Punjabi family, so me wearing hijab was like, you're never going to get married, nothing's ever going to go right for you, so you have those perceptions even from within family who you'd assume are from a Muslim culture, but that's also interesting to have a think about. I'm going to ask one last question, I think, and then we wrap up, yeah? So the last question is, are women allowed to be in higher leadership positions?
Why not? Why not? I'm a senior fellow at the Higher Education Academy. So I don't see a problem. I led 2 MA programs at higher education for 3 years. I led in the Islamic Societies in Algeria. I don't see any conflicts between this, because I see the companions of the Prophet were leaders in their own way. As long as it doesn't conflict. The difference, the discussion about leadership of women in Islamic literature, I have to appreciate there is a discussion, and this discussion it's taken sometimes without knowledge. People take it from Facebook posts, from social media, the fast food knowledge, which is not knowledge, which is not in depth. But if you go in depth and study in depth, you will find a lot of debate amongst the classical scholars about the type of leadership, and they are talking about the top leadership of the nation, Muslim Ummah, whether this is, and this doesn't stop her from being in a shura position consultation. But other forms of leadership, Aisha was a leader with the companions in terms of knowledge. There is a Mustadrak, the Sahaba, they would come to Aisha. She was in Mawqa'at al-Jamal. She was a leader in there. I'm not saying is as an ideal status then is a time of conflict and sadness. However, the companions who were with her, they were scholars. The companions, they were with Aisha radiallahu anha. In that type of leadership, they were scholars and they were pious and they know about the Prophet, peace be upon him, more than we know about that. So yes, definitely my answer is yes, she can be a leader in her. She is a leader already in her house. She is not someone as this type of stereotype of ignorance, submissive in her house. We've seen the companions, they were, Khawla, she was not, she took her husband to the Prophet, and when the Prophet's answer was not there, she actually also answered. I see leadership as not only as a position, I see leadership as action. I see leadership as individual making a change in the world. So if you are a person with vision and with values and with principles and you are acting, you are a leader. And there are individuals who change so much in the world. And there are positions they did nothing. But I don't see a conflict. Why not? You be a devoted Muslim woman wearing hijab and at the same time, keeping and respecting your values and ethics, at the same time have some leadership positions at different levels. Even at parliaments, MPs, I see Salama acting in Hudaybiyah as an MP. Not as an MP is different than an MP nowadays, is higher than that, because she was giving a consultation to the Prophet, peace be upon him, is much higher than an MP would do. The difference is about the discussion about Khilafah, the political top leadership. That's where actually the discussion about the women leadership, with some people they take it and they just apply it. I think that we need knowledge. We need in-depth knowledge from the classical sources, and go and read for Ibn Hazm, go and read for the four schools of thought, go and read for Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf and Zufar, and how their beautiful discussions and intellectual discussion about the issues. Then you see the beauty of knowledge in depth, and you see the differences, and you see how they deal with it, really trying to come to an objective kind of standard of understanding the text. I hope I answered the question.
Jazakallah khairan to our speakers for taking our time to do this for us, and thank you all for coming. The turnout today is amazing, mashallah, and we hope to see you all for the other talks for the rest of the week, inshallah. Tomorrow we have a talk by Muhammad Hijab on Islam and atheism, and then on Thursday there's a talk by Sheikh Shafi on misconceptions of Islam, and then on Friday there's one by Yahya Rabi on the miracles in the Quran. So please come through. I think it's all going to be here by 6:15 p.m. inshallah. Thank you.